everyone, Jaymes Mansfield here bringing you yet another video. Oh my god, you guys, I'm excited to bring you today's video. We are doing Iconic Brunettes! Yes! And today's Iconic Brunette is Natalie Wood. Oh, classic, amazing, timeless old Hollywood. Gorgeous Natalie Wood, who was tragically taken from us far too soon, but we're going to get into it because her story is fascinating. She's more than just the way she left this world. She had an incredible career, and I hope you guys are buckled in because it's quite a whirlwind. Oh, before I start, I am using the Best Actress available at Jaymes Mansfield Beauty. This is Brown, Best Actress in Brown. Now, Natalie Wood was born in San Francisco to very strict, cold Russian parents. Yes. Her parents were immigrants from Russia. They had Natalie, and she was sort of like the pride and joy of her mom. Her mom entered this country with stars in her eyes, and she would practice this by taking her young daughter, Natalie, to the movies, where she became a very quiet, well-behaved movie viewer. And there's moments in her autobiography that talk about this, where there was a certain camera that would pan on the audience for, like, you know, publicity for the theater. And Natalie Wood's mom would tell her, Natasha, her real name was Natasha, the cameras are on you right now. She was planting that seed that I'm going to turn this little girl into a star. Now, as luck would have it, there was a film being made locally called, and they needed an extra of a little girl falling and dropping her ice cream cone. Now, Natalie Wood's mother, Maria, saw an opportunity and took it. She made sure to schmooze her way with the director to get Natalie the bit part. And from this exposure, she decided, we're going to move this family. We're going to uproot and move to Hollywood. Because just from this little bit part, she decided, my little girl is going to be a star. Now, stage mother is quite the word you would use for Natalie Wood's mom, Maria. But let me just say this. She turned that little girl into a star, and the methods she went to do so are a bit shocking by today's standards. Now, Natalie Wood would book work here and there, but she was going to audition for a role in a film starring Orson Welles, the great Orson Welles. But the role required, like, emotion and for the little girl to cry. So during the audition, in order to get the emotion, the raw emotion she wanted out of her daughter, Maria brought to set a jar that held a live butterfly. And while her daughter was doing the audition, she stood in front of her with the jar of butterfly. She pulled it out and tore the wings off the butterfly. What? To get a reaction out of her sensitive daughter, Natalie, who, of course, burst into tears and landed the audition. Like, when I heard this, I was like, are you kidding me? It's like, what the hell? That is messed up. But that is what her mother did. That's the length she went to get the emotion out of her daughter so that she could book the job. Now, Natalie would become an actually pretty prolific young actress. Like, she was a little bit of a child prodigy, minus the fact that she didn't know how to read. She was only in kindergarten, so lines were fed to her, but she had a natural talent to memorize them upon hearing them. She didn't love the name change from Natasha to Natalie Wood. They very much Americanized her name to make it fit better on a marquee. So Natasha would become Natalie Wood. And from here, she would go on to make appearances in many a film. Probably one of her most iconic in many people's eyes would be the timeless Christmas classic, A Miracle on 31st Street. Yes, the Santa Claus movie that they show all the time. Natalie Wood, I know the Mara Wilson version from childhood from the 90s, but the original starred Natalie Wood as the cynical little girl who didn't believe in Santa Claus. And this would pair her alongside Maureen O'Hara, which was actually a pretty impressionable thing to happen to Natalie because she didn't have the best relationship with her mom. Like, her mom was very much like a cold, shut-off stage mom. Like, she was insistent on making this little girl a star. But Maureen O'Hara was warm to her and nurtured her, even during these long shooting hours where they had to be in this department store Macy's for a long period of time. Like, she would basically take Natalie and they would go to, like, certain sections and try on clothes and after hours, just to, like, make fun for the little girl and make it not seem so much like a work environment, because she was thrust into being this little actress and she was a natural. Like, in front of the camera, she's great. Like, she could do accents, she could do all sorts of things. Like, she was truly booking work, and deservedly so. And she would become like the go-to girl for like a child actress at that period in time. Now, a certain event would happen in Natalie Wood's life in her childhood that would have an impression on her for the rest of her life. Now, Natalie Wood booked a role where she would have to be on a bridge that would give way. Now, the stunt actually gave way too soon, and it scared little Natalie and left an impression on her that left a fear of water, especially like dark water. Like, she had a fear of it and a fear of drowning. And when she eventually booked the role in Bette Davis's film The Star, she played her daughter, a stunt came about where it required her to be in the water, and Natalie was petrified. Like, she was terrified to do the stunt. She didn't want to do it. And Bette Davis actually used her power and her influence to tell the director, look, you're going to have to hire a stunt woman. She's not doing that. Like, she stepped in, and Natalie Wood learned a lesson that day. It's like, the more work you land, the more respectable you become, and the more power you can command. So she planted that seed, like, okay, I'm going to have to establish myself here to make sure that shit gets done the way I want it to be done. Much in the way Bette Davis, when she didn't want to do something, she would let you know, and she wasn't doing it. Like, this left an impression on Natalie, and she thought to herself, you know what? Yeah, that's how it's going to be. If I don't want to do something, I'm going to let them know, especially if it's dangerous. Absolutely not. Now, come Natalie Wood's teenage years, she was getting kind of fed up with the little girl roles. Like, she didn't want to be seen as a little girl anymore. So, naturally, they actually transitioned her into being a teenage actress fairly naturally. Like, she started doing them right away. Like, she was ecstatic to start doing them. But with one caveat, she worked it out with her studio that she'd be allowed to attend actual high school because she wanted some idea of like a normal childhood. Like, she wanted to attend high school in a real high school and actually make friends and have an experience outside of, you know, being this young worker. And this would cause a rift between her and her mom, which eventually Natalie would become a bit of a troublemaker and a bit of a girl out for a good time. And it came down to an agreement between her and her mother, where her mother would virtually allow her to do whatever she wanted, so long as she showed up and she provided for the family. Like, she could not miss work. She had to make sure she always reported to work, no matter what she was doing. Other than that, she did not care. Which put a pressure on Natalie, which she lived with for a long period of her life, especially her teenage years and childhood, with this knowledge instilled in her, like, if I fail, my whole family's depending on me. Like, I cannot fail. I must be the breadwinner because I have to provide for my father, my mother, and now my baby sister. Like, she was the breadwinner at like 6 years old. Like, that's an insane amount of pressure to think about being put on a child actor. But come her teenage years, a role was going to come up that would change her legacy forever. And that role would be Rebel Without a Cause. Now, I want to talk a little bit more in detail about this, so I'm going to tease the rest of this, and I'll be right back. All right, we are back. Now, Rebel Without a Cause will become a phenomenon. But the process of Natalie Wood getting this role was tricky because she was pigeonholed as being still a child star and thought of like very much like a very young juvenile kind of actor, but not necessarily a juvenile delinquent, which the role called for. So, Natalie Wood was persistent. She wanted this part because she knew it was exactly what she needed to break out into more mature roles. So she essentially like campaigned hard for it. Like, she got to know a lot of the actors that were cast in it, and she even would work with Jaymes Dean before this in a small production teleplay where he didn't have the best impression of her. Like, he didn't really think much of her because he thought of her as being just kind of like your run-of-the-mill, factory-made child star. A little disrespectful, which again, he had a tendency to be, but all catty closet queens are. But I digress. Now, the original running for this role was actually going to be Marlon Brando and Jaymes Mansfield. They're originally the ideal couple they wanted for this part. But things would change, things would shuffle around, and as luck would have it, Natalie Wood would end up getting into trouble after going out on a wild, fun time with another actor, where she actually had gotten into trouble with the law. And she went back to Jack Warner and told him, like, see, I'm a juvenile delinquent. Will you consider me for this part now? And naturally tested her, and she got it. Like, she had really campaigned hard for it, though. And the role changed drastically. Like originally the role of Judy was going to be something more trashy and more of like a stereotypical bad girl that you think of now. Whereas the difference with Natalie Wood is she was a little trashy and a little loose, but she also had like this nurturing side to her, which made for a much more interesting character in my opinion. Like Judy's a little bit more layered. Like she's a bit of a lampshade girlfriend for like people who aren't used to the way these movies are made, but she has this warmth to her, which is like the archetype for a lot of kind of girlfriend roles that would come out of Hollywood afterwards. But she was the blueprint for it, of like that girl. It kind of reminds me a bit of the SNL skit of the boxer's girlfriend before every fight. Like, I know, Jimmy's got another fight again. You know, I'm not doing too well. It's very that, like that kind of acting. But it's kind of the archetype for that kind of girl in film. And naturally, she was a smash in it. Her, James Dean, and Sal Mineo had made a huge impression. And from here, she had launched herself into a new stratosphere of stardom. And the roles just kept coming after this. Now, when you look at her filmography, it's kind of interesting because when you think of like iconic Hollywood actresses like Marilyn Monroe, Elizabeth Taylor, Natalie Wood doesn't necessarily pop up in that pantheon right away. Like Audrey Hepburn and other girls will pop up, but usually before Natalie Wood's name does. And that's a little strange because I feel like she had a very successful career. And she was very, very famous. But for some reason, she doesn't necessarily spring to mind right away. Maybe it's because she like lived a little longer, I guess, but I digress. Like, she has some heavy hitters under her belt, from Rebel Without a Cause, Miracle on 31st Street, like The Star, and another 60s film she would make, which also set a tone for another theme in her career of proving herself. She was thought of for the role of Maria in the musical adaptation of West Side Story for the big screen. Now, she did not feel the most comfortable taking on this role because it's essentially casting her as a Puerto Rican girl when Natalie Wood is as Russian as they come. But she still really wanted the role because she wanted to prove herself as an actress and she really wanted to sing. And sing she wanted to, but sadly, she would practice and practice and practice, but they pulled one over her eyes. Like, they insisted on her, like, yes, Natalie, we'll consider using your voice for this part. Knowing full and goddamn well they had no intention of using her actual voice. But they let her throw herself to the wolves anyway and practice and rehearse, doing all this, like, vocal work, only for them to replace her voice with Marni Nixon, famed ghost singer. A similar story would also play out with Audrey Hepburn. Like, where they had her basically go through all this trial and tribulation to take vocal lessons, knowing full and goddamn well they were never actually going to use her vocals. Which is kind of sad, but again, it's just like, it's kind of a catch-22 in this situation, so I'd rather just move on from it. Now, going on from here, Natalie Wood would get a chance to star in yet another major musical adaptation. And this time, she was going to employ some of those lessons she had learned from Bette Davis, whereas she established herself as a major actress that draws money for the box office. So, things are going to change for her. She was going to be heard. Her voice was going to be heard. So, the role of Gypsy Rose Lee, the adaptation of the famous burlesque dancer Gypsy Rose Lee, had been adapted into a widely successful musical. Like, it was a phenomenon on Broadway, and Natalie Wood wanted this part in the worst way, and she campaigned and she got it. Now, she insisted she was going to be heard and she was going to sing, and I think the studio was a little luxe on this because the subject matter in itself was a bit more, let's say, not the biggest thing you could take seriously anyway. It was burlesque, stripping. So they figured, you know, she's playing a stripper, big deal if she uses her voice. We'll just capitalize on the fact that she is who she is, and it's going to be a hit no matter what, because Natalie Wood's name drew money. But Gypsy would be a gigantic success for her. The reason Natalie Wood felt so passionate about this is because it kind of sang home a lot of the same tribulations she had gone through. Like, Gypsy Rose Lee was famously a child phenomenon, where Gypsy Rose Lee was essentially a child performer at the start, who had an overbearing mother that was searching for some kind of talent she could exploit to make money off of this child, so that they could provide for the family. Sound familiar? It certainly did for Natalie Wood. She wanted this part because she just resonated so much with her. So she got it and she knocks it out of the park. Like, honestly, the singing is great. The costumes are lovely. But just that famous scene of her as Gypsy in the dressing room when she's finally been glamorized and she's living her best life as a successful stripper, and she tells off her mother, basically telling her, like, look, you said I was going to be a failure my whole life. Look at me now. Look how I live. It's like the best. That very much like the archetypal scene of, look at me now. If you could see me now. Okay, it's got to trim a few things here, make it a little shorter. But come the 1970s, Natalie Wood would fall in love and marry Robert Wagner. Now, Natalie Wood would go on to have a fairly successful career. Like, she's just making movies left and right. Like, she has a very extensive filmography. But tragedy would soon befall Natalie Wood's life come 1980. She was cast to star in a film alongside Christopher Walken, and there was trouble in paradise. Like, her and Robert Wagner were not getting along the best. So they're essentially living in separate houses, separate beds. Like, she was trapped on an island with him on vacation after a large fight, and she wanted to go home. And they were going to separate. It seemed like they were on this road towards that. Now, her, Christopher Walken, and Robert Wagner would be on a boat one night, and mysterious circumstances, Natalie Wood ends up in the water and sadly drowns. Now, Natalie Wood had a gigantic fear of water, which was already suspicious to many because she didn't know how to swim and she did not like water. So under no circumstances was she had ever gone near it. And she hated being on boats. So it's all very mysterious, and actually her case has been reopened to be examined because her sister Lana has been suspicious for years and has been wanting to have this case reopened and re-examined because she did not feel like it got the attention it deserved. And we're still waiting on the outcome of what's to come from this and the conspiracy theories and everything. Like, we'll just have to wait and see what happens. But I want to talk about more of Natalie Wood and more of her career because I feel like a lot of people kind of focus on the true crime aspect of her life when there was so much more to her. Like, she had such an incredible career. Okay, let me just turn this around. Gorgeous. I was inspired a lot by, like, Natalie in the 1960s, like her Gypsy kind of era. Like, very beautiful, soft, brown bob. Like, so beautiful, so timeless. Like, a girl could wear this hairstyle today and still be a stunner. Like, she had such a timeless, radiant beauty to her. Like, she's so refined, considering, like, she's just a poor girl from San Francisco that made good. Like, it's really incredible, her story, and the fact that she had such a long career with so many great things on her filmography. Now, I'm going to cut this and try this on. I'll be right back with the final result. This message is for my haters. Look at me now. Look how I live. Look at this mansion. I got this. Me. Jaymes Mansfield got this. All from shaking what I have. Shaking my shimmy. Me! Welcome back. This is the final result, and I have to say, I'm obsessed. Like, it literally looks like her hair. Like, I always forget just, like, how sexy and, like, timeless her hair really is. Like, I feel like you could wear this hairstyle and turn a few heads nowadays. Like, it's really cute. Like, it's very saucy, but also kind of, like, refined and a little elegant. Come on, Natalie Wood. Okay, who would wear it? Natalie Wood. Oh, my gosh. So, I have to say, I enjoyed this immensely. I want to do Natalie Wood for a while now because she's one of my favorite brunettes, especially like actresses. Like, she has such an interesting career. Like, and what a lot of heavy hitters. Like, she had a lot of hits under her belt. Now, I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Iconic Brunettes. Before I go, I have to thank my wiglets. Roll it! And I'd like to say a thank you to my wiglets, Jacob, Ernie, Duke, Roy, Just BKZ, Vera, Cuervo, myself, Sponge King, Pearface, Steve, so many kitties, Jake, JT, Christine, Curtis, Miss Mosey D, Romeo and Juliet, Selena, Rose, Darth Curray, Catalina, Miss Lansing, Eliza, Maureen, Molly, Carl, Dolores, Larissa, Martha, Louise, Harmon, Astro, B-Rex, Matthew, Roger, Tyler, Brian, David, Margarita, Adam, Samuel, and Michael. Thank you all so much. Thank you so much, wiglets. I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to wear this wig, it'll actually be available on my Jaymes Mansfield Beauty website. Look for that used wig tab and get your own Iconic Brunettes Natalie Wood inspired wig. I hope you all enjoyed this. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, bye. Now, hit the outro. Click here and watch me style a full lace wig from Temu. Or watch Iconic Blondes. Lauren the Call. Come on, click it now you want to. If you don't click it, you're super, super lame.
This pool is nice. Do you think I need buccal fat removal? Quentin Tarantino wanted to see my feet. I was Stifler's mom. They call me a MILF.